Vale, si queréis ir sentándoos.
Please, can the photographers please sit down? Remember that everyone has to be sitting down for the press conference. Good morning. And this is, we're almost come to the end. We're presenting the film LEYES de la Frontera, which closes the official section of this edition of the San Sebastian Film Festival. And to present it, we have with us Daniel Monzon, director and scriptwriter, Jorge Guerrica Echevarria, also scriptwriter, actors, Marco Buñe, Marcos Ruiz, Begoña Vargas, Sanchez Salgado. Please raise your hands if you want to ask a question. But let me start. If no one's going to raise, all good. Your question is going to interest us, I'm sure. My curiosity lies in that we know that Jorge and Daniel have worked together several times in the last 4 times, films at least, but they never adapted a novel from Cell 211, and it's a novel by Javier Cercas, and the LEYES de Fronteras, which is the name of the novel. What was the process of adapting it? Whether you've modified a lot of the material from the novel, did you bring it into your own field? This is a question for the scriptwriter as well as the director. When I read the novel, I read it in one single night, and when I finished it, I said, well, I want to put this novel on the screen because it affected me a lot. And the first feeling I had was, well, there was 2 movies, basically, because even the feeling that the novel drove me to was an extraordinary film by Sergio Leone, which is Once Upon a Time in America. There's a first part where all the young part, where they're young and where later on the adults was remember what happened to them when they were young. Well, this was a very big task to try to do two films that lasted 2 hours long. Didn't make much sense. I gave the novel to Owen Rock, the producer, to see whether he was interested in. He was immediately interested, and he's from Girona. And we asked for the rights, and Jorge Guerrica, I said, read the novel and see what you like, and he liked it a lot. But we did coincide. It was complicated to adapt because it's a novel. The languages, they're 2 languages different. The literature of cinema, we had to condense everything that happened in those 2 parts. We went over things for several years, and we came to this version where we realized that we had to see what happened and divide the life of Gafita Spexi. And that second part was condensed in the prologue and the epilogue and would transmit and convey the same feeling of melancholy about a past, which could have been one way, and it didn't end up being that way, which was conveyed in the novel. When we gave the film to Javier Cercas, while I was looking at it, I said, I thought, wonder what the author of the book thinks of it, and he applauded, and he didn't stop applauding. He thought it was a fantastic adaptation. He hugged us, and he said something. Not all writers say this, but it is true. They say to be faithful and loyal to the spirit of the novel, you have to be unloyal or not be loyal to the spirit of it, that is to say. And what you've got to do is to offer your look and your perspective on things and what the novel conveys to you, otherwise you wouldn't adapt it. You like the novel and you want to put on the screen what it conveyed to you when you read it. So therefore it's a version which is quite loyal in its spirit, and very free in the way it's written. Jorge? Exactly, more or less what you've just said. Well, we normally say that good novels are not good to adapt. It's better to have a poor novel with an interesting plot, and better films are made of these. But after doing this work, I don't agree with that. I think good novels, what they have above all is great characters, and when you've got good characters, inventing or recreating the situations to put it on the screen in a film is much easier. When you got Zarco, Tere, or Spexi, these 3 characters, they're so well delineated. For example, you put them in a situation that doesn't exist in the book, but you know exactly what they're going to say, and that's what happened to us here. That is to say, from when we started, And this is something what we do sometimes when we adapt things before working with the plot. And so let's see how Farco would speak, or Tharco or Tere would speak. And then you realize it's quite easy. And I know how Tere would speak. I knew how Tharco would speak. So therefore, well, I told Therkas, the author, I said it was quite easy. It was difficult to find the formula, but we enjoyed it very much, and that's something doesn't happen all the time. Hi, a question is for the cast. That is to say, what was it like to get it back into the 1970s, which was a really tough time back then? And then for some of you, I think it's your first feature film. So what was it to get involved in a feature film? You start? As regards to that period, well, we had lockdown, so we could take advantage of that time before we shot. Oh, there was a lot of video calls with Danielle sent us an email with an enormous amount of films and documentaries and music from that time, anything that could have helped us. And then to get involved in that period, what helped me and to get into the character was the costume design, the T-shirts that were very tight, the jean jackets and bell-bottom pants, jeans, and to being on set and then to see all my colleagues involved, well, portraying their characters as well. Well, more or less the same thing. We had lockdown, and we had a lot of time, and sometimes you don't have enough time for many projects to do this. And the truth, it was we were thankful that that's why via Zoom and everything we shared a lot of information between us through a WhatsApp group, and we could maintain the same tone and also to be at the right moment in the film. Personally, it's true that it's my first feature film, and it's a dream come true, because the crew and the cast, everyone, have helped us very much, because Arte, who did a great job with the makeup and everything, especially in costume design, we dived right into the deep end of Las Leyes de la Frontera, and to get involved, it was very, very easy to get into Tere and to get into the 1970s. I share what my colleague said. The submersion was looking at films from that time, talking to people that lived that period, reading books, seeing some fanzine TV programs, and then with Danielle, it was quite easy. Albeit it's the first feature film that I've made. With Daniel, it's easy and very comfortable to work with him, so everything was quite simple. Initially, that is to say. Yes. The pandemic stopped us in our feet, and we were locked in, and so there was a lockdown, and so we held meetings via Zoom. And what I wanted to do was that we had the group already set, and we wanted that group or that band of friends to have some camaraderie. That's a real relationship, and there was. Therefore, we met up weekly. We had a Zoom meeting. I talked to them individually as well. We were looking for the hope to be able to shoot the film at that time, which was such a lot of anguish, all being in lockdown. It was like a light at the end of the tunnel. Are we going to really shoot it? I said, undoubtedly, we're going to shoot the film. But obviously, we said, let's see what's going to happen with this pandemic. But it was something that we shared an energy, which was great, because it helped us to keep us going. And so I gave him a lot of homework during the lockdown. But this was something that kept you very energetic. There's a lot of, obviously, films of that period that talked about the Spain of that time, like La Escopeta Nacional or Asignatura Pendiente. Films by Eloy de la Iglesia, newspapers, news, a lot of music from that time, not only the music that they listened to, but any person, or a tearaway, for example, or any person in that context. And above all, they set up their own WhatsApp groups, and they were contaminating themselves from that friendship. And then some of the actors that, by the way, who are in the front row, 3 of them are in the front row, Victor, Xavi, and Jorge, who do Dracula, Fatso, and the Chino. That's their first experience in films, and other people in the group. And another thing that I said to them, I said, Jesus, let your hair grow, you buggers. because on the day-to-day they were looking at the screen and they started to get into their roles. So therefore, when finally that we were allowed to go out and there was a marvelous energy, and you had already turned into some real tearaways with really long hair and friends because we knew each other through video conferences. I said, oh, geez, we're a gang. Yes, the energy when we started to rehearse, it was overwhelming. There was nothing that could stop them, and that's what I wanted to convey on the screen, the truth of our friendship, because Spexy is not only finds Tere and he falls in love with her, and he goes across the border, but he finds a family, which any adolescent is looking for, a group to belong to, and he doesn't find it in his own class group, but on the other side of the border, and the group that takes him in. And I wanted that kindness to be true. So this group of friends is a gang. We're a gang for the rest of our lives. The good thing about the film also, albeit they didn't know that period, the emotions at all periods at that age are very similar, so therefore they connected really quickly with what the characters had, what they were looking for at that moment of transition between going into adulthood. You don't know what's going to be of you, which way you're going to go, how you're going to live, make a living. You think you're already of age, but you're still a child or an adolescent. They understood that perfectly, and they incorporated it into that period of time. Hi, thanks for the film. I have a question for the actors, and then a second question perhaps for Daniel. For the actors, the question is, you saw films during the lockdown and of tearaways and outlaws, and so it's more about, did you know that subgenre, or did you not know it before, and what feelings did you have to see those kinds of films? Do you think that nowadays there's a film like that kind of films were in the past, of those tearaways, where there are films that explain something that type of film explained, or is it different in this case? Does it convey something different to those films? The first time to go, it was thanks to my father, I found a comic, Víbora, Sangre de Barrio, when I was 14 or 15 years of age, and the truth is it was very attractive. I liked it. What happens to these people? What are they telling me? So therefore, from there, I saw films, for example, Deprisa, Navajeros, Spanish films of that period, and that's why making the film is a dream come true, because to be able to portray a character like Zarco, who, like all of those great characters in the past who were hooligans and thugs, it's a dream come true, really, to be able to. I also knew the genre because my father would speak about it. He talked me about Deprisa, and he lived that period, this movement of the 1970s of the world of thugs. But the film, it takes place in Girona. My father lived in Madrid, but there was a lot of similarities of what he told me, at least. And I discovered films about thugs, but I had a very light idea about it, but then I fell in love with that films about thugs. And during lockdown, I would watch a film every day with my father and think, well, we're going to make a film that cool. So I thought it was incredible. I thought it was the most. Same to me. I already know what the thug generation was, and I started to seeing films like Navajeros, Colegas, Deprisa. But the truth is, my character, in any case, doesn't belong to this world. So therefore, it helped me to know what it was about, but perhaps not as much as my colleagues. You were going to learn about it through the hand. They were going to tell it to me and show it to me during the shooting of the film. And as regards that sort of films of the 1970s, end of the 70s and early 80s, is quite peculiar. It's quite encapsulated, because I think the power behind those films is that they're portrayed by the true thugs. So therefore, it's almost documentary back at that time, albeit that Jose Antonio Roma was more Models Saura, or also Lelo de la Iglesia was much more crude in his approach, but it was portrayed by the people who ended up dead or shot by the police or they OD'd on heroin. So therefore you see this and you know what happened and what was the fate of all of these characters, all of these thugs. There are practically all of them are dead. We'll only be able to talk to one of the survivors, which is El Pera, to talk firsthand with one of those protagonists of that period. But I don't see I couldn't say that there exists a cinema very similar to that in my case. That's quite peculiar and particular to that period. In fact, when we got close to that genre, when we approached the genre, Leyes de la Frontera doesn't want to be... it's not. There's no mannerism involved there. We don't want to make it similar to those in the past. It would be ridiculous to do so. I believe that this is a film that it's approached from the perspective of Spexy, who what I liked in the film. That's that the point of view is that kid who's a middle class clist that goes to that world. He takes us by the hand and introduces us, enters that world. So therefore, his memories, the idealization of that period, which was the most vivid, the most passionate that he's ever had in his life. So therefore, it's all stylized. That's like Spexy remembers that, and I remember that because I was also a kid. I lived with thugs, so I was like Spexy. From my window, I could see all of those fields where these thugs used to live, who were figures who robbed me and assaulted me, but I was afraid of them. But I was fascinated because I felt that their way of living and not overcoming any types of conventions. So I had that same interest, like Spexy. So therefore, that's the approach of the film. I remember that. I remember what happened. And it stylizes the genre. Above all, it's a love story. It's a beautiful and moving love story of the first teenager's love story. That's what the film's about. And in that context of what is a thug, it's like an Iberian thriller, but the genre formally is stylized from the format. We've used a scope format. This is it's a square, it's 185, and it's super vitaminizing the genre. We use the period cars, and it's a contemporary way of contemplating that, which doesn't mean that the film is absolutely based. All of the art of the film, the costumes, everything is from that period. It's very loyal there, but the spirit and the tone has it's more passionate. There's a certain energy because we look through the eyes of the leading actor. Another interesting thing is that, as we all know, how that finished, how that ended. For example, most of them ended up in drugs and heroin. They died due to OD'd with heroin. We were playing with that idea, which is in the head of the audience. We were seeing how the first part was a lot of light, where there was a lot of fun. It's all a game. And we forgot one that we already know, but it's present in a certain way. Even Zarco says that this is going to get worse from here on in. It's all going to be downhill. So therefore, that's also ways in our vision of how we look at the very luminous part of the beginning of the film. So the date 1978, chosen from the novel, makes sense because it's the last summer before heroin took over. It started to appear, but it was as of that period. With heroin, everything just went downhill. And the film, there's a first part in which Spexy and everyone, it's almost playful. Zarco Spirit, who's a very tough guy, but he's fun. He's got a lot of swing, but there's a moment in where everything twists, where it's just going downhill to tragedy. What happens to Spexy? It's marvelous. He finds his friends, and this is a lot of fun. Dances in the discotheques. And meets this beautiful girl who plays with me. I'll go wherever I'll do whatever I want, whatever she says. To breaking the law, the adrenaline, running out, screaming, and fucking and everything. It's marvelous. And there's a moment in which Zarco reminds her, hey, listen, my friend, you've seen everything you have to see. And the film and the novel also, which is very interesting. as their title says, the laws of the border or the frontier. It's like a Western that says society, depending on where you're born, one side or the other side of the border reserves a fate for you. Zarco has it very clear that they've been reserved the whole downhill. And however, someone from the mid classes, he's a normal kid. Society more prepared is to look at him sympathetically. For example, it was just a small mistake, but the others on the other side, it's quite clear the city is stuck to their neighborhood. The distance is very short, space-wise, but it's very large emotionally, or existentially, or socially. So therefore, there's a game of injustices that take place, that happened then and continue to happen now, is something which is very interesting from the novel. Hi, from Catalonia Radio. I'd like to ask Daniel, you were talking about the difference of your film with what's the film about thugs in the 1970s. What were you thinking about, and what films were you thinking about? Not only films about thugs, but westerns, as you just mentioned. I said, how am I going to shoot this that chase scene and in the car? And I said, we weren't thinking about a specific film per se. Obviously, I've seen thousands of films, and they do emerge one way or another, but I didn't want to pay any tribute, really. There was no nod to Gang House, for example. Let's do that like Tarantino says, and let's give it a more grain and do it in super 16 millimeters. But no, what we wanted to do was to tell the story of Zarco, Tere, and Spexy, of his band, his group, his gang, and that context during the period of transition in Spain. And above all, well, we had the story, but obviously there's a part which is a lot of fun, was to recreate the styles of that genre. There's stealing bags, there's vibrating car chases, there's music. We've got periods like Las Grecas, well, te estoy hablando yo locamente, which tells the story that when Spexy dances with her in the discotheque. So if I was Spexy, I would also, for Tere, I would rob banks. There's no doubt in my mind. So therefore, all of those theories, the switchblades and cars and everything, for example, I want to recover that from those films, but I've done it in other films as well, is that freshness of a cast which has not been in a big feature film, that reality which existed in La Loma and El Oile de la Iglesia films. I wanted that for this Las Leyes de la Frontera, and part of them, as you can see, Victor, Xavi, and Jorge as representatives, marvelous representatives of that gang, that breathes a lot of truth, and that has a lot to do with that types of films. Authenticity, that street, being out in the street, because plus they're magnificent actors. They didn't know this, but it was purely real when we rehearsed, and obviously the script, Jorge has a great ear for dialogues, but we put them in their mouths and we made them speak it, and it was them themselves. It came out naturally for you. I think we all learned a lot from them as well. They gave us a lot of freshness. I learned an enormous amount. There are many things I know about Tere. It's thanks to them. And that combination of actors who had an experience with people who came with that truth behind them and that power, that mixture means what, a combination means what, which brings about all of the energy in their characters. And I think what I liked about that films about the thugs is that feeling of authenticity that the characters distill or convey. That's what I was looking for. And as regards to the music that I started to talk about, you've got the songs that evoke that period, the original songs, but then within stylizing the genre, I was seeking to a group that could compose songs that sounded like that period, but from a contemporary standpoint, and I invited them to end up doing the soundtrack with the film, which the group is a marvelous group. It's even more marvelous. Derby Mortoretas, Borrito, Cachimba, these guys are geniuses. It's a group from Sevilla which does psychedelic progressive rock, a mixture between Triana and Led Zeppelin, but with a very special aroma which gave it that power and that energy to the film. Hi, good morning. First of all, I would like to do is congratulate you for the film and also for your career, Daniel, and ask you how your films have evolved from 1999 that you shot at the heart of the warrior. What characteristics of your film kept, and then which ones have changed until you've come all the way to this film, Las Leyes de la Frontera? Thank you very much. I don't know how to answer you. It's true. I think that perhaps you can see it better than me from the outside. I get into each project because my heart's beating and I want to get into it. There's no idea as if it's a race I'm going to do or career I'm going to do this, that, and the other. No, I get involved like a little animal into the projects. I get involved in them. I feel them inside them, and they palpitate like inside me. Like Begonia says, no, it's not. You shouldn't do this because it's not good for your career. I don't contemplate things that way. Perhaps that is what encompasses us all. I spent 3 years preparing every film, basically. So that when I was a kid, I realized that I didn't like to live one life. And all of a sudden, I said, well, making films, I can live a lot of lives. So therefore, each film is an adventure in which I submerge myself, and I want to live it full on. Because if I don't do it, for example, I can't convince other people to come along. So, and I want the audience to accompany me as well, because it's a universe, and I invite the audience to get into the film and get involved with the film for 2 hours. So therefore, it's 3 years. I've got to be so convinced that I'm going to maintain the spirit and the passion, very powerful for those 3 years and very high. Jorge and I, for example, when we were writing the Cajacoba, the Kovac box, so where did the ideas come from? And he was talking about us both. It's like a virus that infects you, and that's quite peculiar to say that now at this time of day under the situation we're living. But if you see something something on TV or you read a book, and it's something that just goes right into you, it's like a germ, and that germ can disappear and you might forget it, or it starts to germinate and you're obsessed by the idea and you start to see that accompanies you and you want to put it on the screen. And if it germinates and it obsesses you, the only way to do it, to get rid of the virus, is to make the film. So therefore, that's the energy that drives me to get involved in a project, that passion, that knowing that it's something that I need to tell. But I don't do it rationally, if you know what I'm saying. Excuse me, I'm sorry I didn't answer you. It was a bit long-winded, but nevertheless. Congratulations for the film. You said it's a thug genre, film genre, but are there any challenges in the shooting? For example, with the car scenes and the car chase scenes. What, for example, you have much more. You've got the Pizza de Prisa and Los Golfos had a smaller budget than you have now. Yes, the truth is, when you see the car chases of La Loma and other directors, they're very powerful. So therefore, they shot. For example, the DOP Carlos Guzzi of this film shot a thug's fiddler. He said he did Yo El Vaquilla, which is, he knew how those films were shot, and they did it. They got in the car, they took the camera, and away they went, and without any permits. And if we have an accident, well, we'll shoot it. That's what they used to do. And to compete with that is quite complicated, because the truth is, the emotion that those car chasers had were very complicated. And it is true that, in a certain way, we had to make the grade. We had to, because all of that final car chase, the bank robbery and everything, and that car chase, we wanted the audience to be under the skin of a spexy, something almost physical, that the audience could live it, which make them feel uncomfortable, for example. And I think at the end, when he runs away, when Zarko saves his life directly, and he runs away, so the audience I wanted that physical approach. It's a car chase that the audience could feel them within themselves and was a lot of anxiety and feel uncomfortable. I told it at the beginning to all of the actors and the stunt people, that is to say, we wanted to find that intensity in the car chase. It's something which is very complex to shoot, and you have to use different techniques. And the truth is, we had a more budget than the budget that they had in those films back then. But it was a way of because those films, what they had almost a suicide spirit, and how we're not allowed to do so much. In El Nino, I did do car chases, almost suicidal, because helicopters, and we did it with a lot of, but we had the whole sea, and we had boats. But here on the roads, you might be risking your neck a bit more. And technically, it's all a lot of fun and quite complex. They're fun to shoot. Sometimes they're a bit complicated. But what was quite clear is that we wanted the energy of all of those car chases to be very intensive and almost wear the audience out, almost physically, when they watched it. But what we wanted to do, very much when we made the film, was to reproduce something which was quite peculiar of the thug films. For example, at that time, they were the only ones they shot where there was any action. In general, and in the rest of the films, no one wanted to do a car chase. No one even wanted to do a shootout. It was very American. And these directors back then, just off the top of the head, said, well, we can do this, why not? And so therefore, it's an important part of the attraction that those films still have. That is, that they have a component that brings it very close to the American films, because there's much more action in those films. And it was important to reproduce, with the means we have nowadays, that feeling of it's a film which moves, and it's constantly moving, on the move. Yes, I completely agree. In a certain way, that genre is our particular Western. Americans have their own Westerns. It's a genre on its own. Jesse James and all of these were delinquents, and they were bank robbers as well. So therefore, we've got our version is the thug films, but it's a thriller which is very close. It's very close to us. It's easy to recognize, which talks a lot about us, talks about our society and our roots, and about the dark and the light side of things. And the film, in fact, looks back upon all of that, the transition period in Spain. I lived through it, Jorge, and many of the people that made the film, and you've seen it through years. We've been able to live it because it was an opportunity of living the consequences of that period. But at that time, we who belonged to Spexy's class, for example, it was a Spain. They were singing songs of freedom, and we were going towards the light. There was a spirit, and that's why the film reflects it in its color. It's like a party time, but that was the A side of the democracy, but the B side was that of these thugs, and that's what the film talks about. That is to say, people that came to the big cities to find work, and they were in the outskirts because they couldn't find work, and the kids were seeing from the other side of the border as they were going up having a party, but they didn't feel that they were invited to that party. And why, we who are young, why can't we go to the party and do what they're doing? So they took it on their own, and they stole cars and robbed banks, and they lived very quickly, and they died very quickly as well. Hi. Over here. I'd like to know the actors, these types of scenes, where it's got some violence, not only the car chases or the shootouts, but initially, for example, he gets hit on the head all the time at the beginning of the film. Didn't you hurt yourself, or did you really get hit in some cases? Being hit on the head, especially when you've done several scenes, the difficult thing is not to receive getting hit by your friends. It's not moving away before they hit you, because you know they're going to hit you. But there's a lot of action scenes. There's a scene that I had to run very quickly, and I ended up vomiting after when I finished. I don't know whether I wasn't in shape enough or we had to repeat a lot of scenes. But yeah, the car chases also, then the weapons, the guns. Before we shot, we started to practice to use it. Once again, my character shouldn't know how to use a weapon, but at least Daniel let me try one just because of my personal interest in having to shoot a gun. I didn't receive. I hit. I didn't. I wasn't hit. I used to hit. In fact, poor Jorge, I had a sequence with him. A scene with him, and I was more afraid of him. No, you relax. You hit me. You hit me, Jorge. I don't want to hurt you. And so therefore, it was more that tense situation. If I overdo it with my hand and with the action, with all of the emotion at the moment, and I might hurt him. But no, it all worked out quite well, didn't it, Jorge? When you slapped me, yes. I didn't have too many action scenes. A bit like Berro. I used to hit people, so it was a lot of fun hitting. But I remember we had a good time shooting the action scenes. I remember one of the times that Xavi was driving and Gusi was in the back with the camera and he was falling all over the place. The truth is we had a good time. But they were long days shooting, and to shoot very few minutes, you take a lot of hours. But the truth is we had a great time. In that sense, Jorge, who plays El Chino, he's got his pink shirt on. It was his first film. And he's extraordinary, he's great. The three of them are. In the sequence in which Hidalgo questions him and he slaps him in the face, well, in the rehearsals, he said, you might get a real slap because this has got to look genuine. He didn't get one, he got slapped several times. And also Daniel. And that's an anecdote as well. But it's really funny because after several takes, he came up to my aide, my assistant came up and said, "Have you got it? And you got it. You better because his face is going red." And after we finished, I go, "We're finished." I said, "Didn't you want to be an actor?" And here I am. And his face was all puffed up from the slapping, obviously. You agreed with doing it, of course. You agreed with it, yes, of course. He knew. He said, no. Let him hit me because it's the only way this can really be genuine. The three actors perhaps would like to explain quite briefly what the process was like with the microphone. Yes, please. Your participation. You drop your mask here. Well, the truth as regards those scenes, more aggressive scenes, especially when they were, obviously as an actor, you want to commit yourself for it to be as realistic as possible. And obviously, I thank you very much. And when they got slapped, the truth is, the moment that it seemed it was automatic, but we had to stop. But I'm glad you stopped shooting before he slapped me to repeat those scenes. But it was a marvelous experience, of course. I want to thank Xavi for hitting you. Xavi, not only about the action scenes, but the experience to see getting involved in a film that you've never suspected that you would get into. Xavi plays Fatso, if he drops the mask, well, I would have never imagined 2 years ago they said, no, you're going to be doing a film with Daniel Monzon. And I was a fanatic of Cell 211. So, well, yeah, go to bed and leave me alone. And the truth is that the experience made me realize, well, geez, there are things that I like, and I like the experience very much of acting. It's something that, let's see if we can continue doing it, and above all, an unforgettable experience. I would never have imagined. I'm just a kid, a normal kid who lives in the neighborhood, who's got his job and in life, my flat with a colleague, and I live with a colleague, so therefore seeing myself in the big screen for me and for my family has been it's an experience which is incredible. Excuse me, I've got a hoarse voice. Yes, I had a great night last night, and he's got a hoarse voice. I'm more of the hood than a swing on a tree, but the film, I can't say that, put it in words, but I'm not an actor now. Well, I am because I appear on the screen. I'm a boy who hasn't studied, and you've given me the opportunity of being as I was and to play a role because they said, not me, but because I was scared shitless. I said, let's see what I see, and it's incredible, and everyone backed me up, really good friends. But I just can't because, in that sense, I don't have a voice, I can't speak, and I'm very nervous right now. I'm more nervous than when I was portraying my role in the film. Dracula. Okay, last question, and we've got it over here. Hi, I'd like to ask the three actors, can you talk to us about, it's a period piece, but you can identify youth because it's a journey for everyone, especially Spexy's character. Could you talk, the three of you, about that journey that your characters take during that very intensive summer? Yes, the story of the film in Spexy's, for example, everyone's going to be identify. It's atemporal, that is to say, it's timeless because you're going to see the seas of how the audience is going to look through his eyes. And for example, he lives the last summer of his life, his first love, going from coming of age, a film, to discover who he is truly, and to destroy what he's learnt. Well, Tere, until Spexy turns up, her life is very routine. She's a woman who's an incredible woman. She's a survivor, and her life is structured to a certain extent. She's got her family, who's the gang. He's the hood where she lives, for example. She feels comfortable. She controls the situation. All of a sudden, something turns up that makes her lose control, who's Spexy, his character. And so it breaks up her day-to-day life. That's her journey, Teddy's journey. I think Zarko, he's quite clear, his ideals, his values, and he's loyal to them throughout the entire film. What he's worried about at the end of the day is his family, which is his gang, giving everything I can, get what he needs when he needs it, and live that moment and time 100%. So therefore, Zarko, that's his journey. And then with Spexy, he's got a lot of moments. Initially, he takes him in. He doesn't know whether he wants to use it for someone or no. And there's really sort of a real friendship there and love. So therefore, there's a lot of conflicts with Teddy as well. But the moment of giving him advice to leave here, but this is not his place, and it's not going to end up well for him. This is a great scene. I love working with Marcos in that scene, and I think that at the end is what Zarko represents, that loyalty, that power behind him, and that character and personality, and that's it. Okay. Well, the journey finishes here as well. Thank you very much for coming to Like an Area. There's a big round of applause for the film.